Hello and welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast. Now, I wanted to get my next guest on because sales has moved away from the linear seller selling and buyers buying transaction and moved towards a relational negotiation. Now, he is a negotiation expert and best-selling author of Win-Win: How to Get a Winning Result from Persuasive Negotiation. A professional speaker, having been both the chairman and the president of the Professional Speaking Association. He's a master trainer in negotiating, and he has made and saved his clients many millions of pounds. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Derek Arden.
Janice, thank you very much. It's a great honour and pleasure to be with you, particularly at this difficult time in our history.
Well, let's start with that. Given that we're experiencing unique challenges, what would your advice be to sellers and business leaders that must ride out the pandemic?
Well, some critical things that you need to do, and this is a question I often get asked recently. The first thing you do is you must keep your integrity. You must keep it honest. Do not take advantage of this situation. We've heard stories of people taking advantage of the situation, and if you do that by hiking up your prices just at a time when everybody's desperate, people aren't earning enough money, they're being furlonged and all that thing, it's really important that you keep a small margin. You may have to put your prices up a bit because your gross profit margin's down, but at the end of the day, be honest, tell them the truth, etc., etc. And of course, it goes back to our real relationship selling model, which is all about know, like, and trust. You need to know the client well, and then you need to get to like them, and then you build the trust. And that's the same with the companies, isn't it? You need to know the company, you need to like the company and their values, and then people trust you. And it takes a long time to build up trust, but it takes seconds to lose trust if you don't treat people properly. So relationship selling is what it says. It's about relationships. So when people have got their backs to the wall, if you take advantage of them, then they will remember. And that's not what good win-win salespeople, negotiators, influencers do. So I think that's the most critical thing at the moment, Janice.
I think, there's lots of opportunities for companies to really enhance their brands. We're getting like stories on, both you and I are based in the UK, although, I know listeners all over the world, but they might find similar stories that, British Airways is helping the NHS. That's brilliant for that brand. There's not going to be every single person in British Airways, but, it's a real opportunities for companies to enhance their brand so that when they come out of it, they're in a better position. People think fondly of not only the individual, but also the company. And it's a way of bringing people together where, employees are further apart, but actually there's lots of things that you can do to bring your employees and, enhance your culture. So, I think you had an example. We talked earlier about the NHS. You do work with the NHS. So what are you doing with them now in this environment?
Well, I run training courses for their accountants and their procurement people. And of course, we're not running any training courses now. I had a phone call with some people earlier this week. And what I'm basically doing is reminding them of the basic model of negotiation, which I have written about in Win-Win. I can run through that in about a minute for you, but also saying, remember, people are going to be anxious, they're going to be stressed. When they get a bit fearful, that builds up cortisol, which is the wrong chemicals in the brain. People say things they shouldn't say. They might send emails, who knows what, but bear in mind that the other person won't be coming from the same position as you. So bear that in mind. But you might also say, as I said earlier, you might say, we will need to check these prices afterwards. we need these goods now, but we will check these prices afterwards, and make sure that you're still going to be a relationship supplier. So if you could go away and just review your prices, that would be really helpful to me.
Eric, I would love you to highlight some of your 11 strategies from win-win, the win-win steps of negotiation to help to break through barriers.
It's all in the book, but number one is preparation. Absolutely no excuse when you're negotiating a big transaction or selling on a big transaction not to do your absolute preparation. Proper preparation prevents pretty poor performance. Number two is first impressions. First impressions are crucial. People forget about them. We make up our minds about people in a few seconds. People were looking at LinkedIn profiles to form first impressions. In fact, a friend of mine says that people make up their mind about you. 57% of people make up their mind about you before they've met you, because they're looking at your social media. So that's really important, where you're going to sit at the meeting and things like that. Number three is ask really good questions. How much are you prepared to pay? What is in your budget? How can we resolve this? Notice that they're all big, open-ended questions, and they're short, and they generally begin with how or what. So number four is that listening skills, really listening to what people are saying, how they're saying, their tone of voice. And number five is a body language, which is accompanying that. Pinocchio's nose grew every time he told a lie. So if people are uncomfortable, they generally start fidgeting, particularly around the face. So these are good signs to look out for. It doesn't mean they're lying, but it's a big signal that you need to check it out carefully. The next number is lying, looking out for what people say. Generally, people slow down their voice, more ums and ahs when they're not comfortable with what they're saying. The general thing is that people speak quicker, like a fast-talking car salesperson, but that's not true. People are fibbing or lying. Slow down, because they're having to think through the consequences.
And as you say, you know, it's all in the book, and I've read it, and absolutely brilliant. You know, everything you need to know about negotiation, and you know, as we discussed earlier, you know, it's more important. It's critically important anyway, but certainly now it's really important. I remember you saying, "Do not sell directly," which is relevant to this. What do you mean by that?
Do not sell directly. I'm not quite sure. That's this discussion we had before. I'm not sure I can quite remember.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So it's like linked to listening to clients and the report.
Oh, I'm probably talking about there. I was probably talking. That's why estate agents are so successful when there's a third party. And that's why people are generally not very good at negotiating their own salary, because the conflict comes between you and I. But if you use an agent, at that point, the agent spins one person against the other, spins the story a bit to try and get a win-win deal. I mean, on my bookshelf behind, I've been studying football negotiations in a big way, because there's so much money in football that, of course, there's agents everywhere taking huge commissions. And, of course, they can get the fees up, the transfer fees and the salaries of the footballers much better than they can. That's, you know, and they tell fibs and they make up lies, like a lot of unethical salespeople do, which I would never recommend to anyone. Certainly relationship selling people wouldn't do, but they're selling a one-off commodity. And if people are fooled by, oh, we've got another team coming in for your player and it's in competition, and you often see at the end of the transfer window, deals being done on the last day of the month. Yeah. And of course, that's a sales tactic. We know that people shouldn't be fooled by. Offer ends at 5 o'clock and people rush in to buy it, even though it may not be true. Or
there are a lot of really
nobody listening to this would use a tactic like that, because it's probably unethical, but we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, I was saying there are a lot of poor sales tactics, and whole industries are actually made on them, as you say. You know, agents in football, not great tactics, but you know, it's an industry where it works. But you do say you reap what you sow. Talk to us about that.
Well, the law of sowing and reaping, which is a law which was before the Bible, before the great books, before even Socrates and Plato probably mentioned it, but if you put good things out there, you get good things back. You don't necessarily get them from the same person, but it's linked to the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity says that if you give things to people unconditionally for nothing, they will give you things back in due course. So, you know, if you sow enough seeds and you put enough sales calls in, you're nice to people, you keep a book with all your records in, which remembers the names of the children, where they've been on holiday, what their interests are, which football team they support, which tennis club they play at, which netball team they play at, whatever those interests are. You make a good connection, and they like you much better. But you've got to do it with sincerity. You can't just flaff around and get a name wrong, can you? Once you do that, you blow the whole thing. But most people don't put themselves out. It's what I mean by preparation. And I keep a book of everything that happens during the day, everybody I've spoken to, and I've got a good memory for dates. So I know roughly that we were doing this podcast in April, so I could look back and see what we talked about. And if I've had a few calls today, and people have told me a few personal things, I just make a little note of it, and then you can go back. That's what selling is all about to me, that relationship and that trust. And I think one of the things is, Janice, I've got to tell you, not many people do it. They claim they know it, but do they put it into action? No, because people are generally lazy. And if they're lazy, they don't do it. And you and I know that the top salespeople really do it. And you remember that story we've talked about before of the highest paid car salesman in America was the guy, and they kept wanting to promote him to the sales director, but actually he was making so much commission selling cars, and he had a PA which sent birthday cards to the children, to the wife, anniversary cards. He had this whole infrastructure behind him, and of course the people never went to another dealer to buy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, we've come to the end of the podcast. I love talking to you, and I could listen to you all day, all of your wisdom. But you know, I've got a lot of it in the book, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So tell them how they can contact you.
Well, they can contact me at my website, which is www.derekarden.co.uk. They could email me at action@derekarden.co.uk. And I have a number of sites. I do a negotiators podcast where I interview people, and I have a top masterclass course that I run every twice a year, not to make a profit, just to give people an insight into some of the things we've talked about today, plus other things like writing reports, internet, emails, etc. So they're all on my website. That's www.topmasterclass.co.uk. We run that as a not-for-profit to put things back into the community. But if anyone wants some advice or wants to pick up with me or wants to go on my newsletter, my executive briefing, then just drop me a line at action@derekarden.co.uk.
Well, we'll be putting all the links in the show notes so people can contact you. But I'd like to say thank you so much for sharing, you know, all of your insights. You've been an excellent guest on Scale Your Sales podcast. Thank you, Derek Arden.
Thank you, Janice. It's a pleasure to be with you.